So, joining me on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, Kyle Cords is my guest. Now, Kyle started his career as a writer in Hollywood, where he has worked for some of the industry's top showrunners and producers. When the pandemic hit, though, he realized he wanted to build something different. And that is what we are going to be exploring in this conversation, because he's uncovered, as a digital nomad, many things from many people who shared similar tastes to him, even if they lived a world away. And that really was the mantra that started the evolution of where Kyle has pivoted his work in his development and founding of something called OmList, which, if you don't know it, is a movie recommendation app that matches people to their new favorite films. And we're going to go deep into this pivot. We're going to go deep into the journey of Kyle, and we're going to find out what this really means to all of us, both in terms of uncovering our next favorite movie, as well as maybe exploring and taking that leap of faith for ourselves into ventures or side hustles that might actually produce something as exciting as this. So welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
I mean, that's a nice introduction, isn't it? I mean, I'm positioning this really positively as like, this guy's had a journey. Tell us about the journey, because I guess you didn't start out figuring out that you were going to end up developing a movie recommendation app.
Yeah, no, I think my whole life I've always had like ideas. You know, you're going through the day and you're just like, oh, I wonder why that doesn't happen. And sometimes you Google and you find the thing, you're like, oh, it does exist. And then there's often things that don't exist. And you're like, huh, I wonder why that hasn't happened. And so sometimes it's just like letting time go through it, or you find the right moment to do that. So I remember I was thinking about recommendations. Like I was on Reddit. I was a huge Reddit. I am a huge Reddit fan. I think it's great. I think it has a lot of great information in there. It just feels very like specific and authentic. And I was like, why doesn't Reddit like curate more of like a specified recommendation of like posts or any of this other stuff? Like it's just popular and then what you subscribe to. And I'm like, why is there just like a lack of general recommendation in general with this stuff? And so I was like, oh, I wish that I could just like upvote, downvote, go swipe through, and then it just learned a lot more about me and curated more around that. And a lot of like current algorithms like TikTok, they sort of operate around this thesis, but I was having this idea about 10 years ago, and I think that from that point, I don't know. I think life is constantly just trying to figure things out, and I've always tried to think of things as like an experience, and how do you get somebody that might not want to do this, or what's the most fun version of this? And I think like that's kind of what led me into Hollywood initially. Was I just loved storytelling and I loved experiences that felt like it created a very, I don't know, like sometimes the best movies, you go in and you come out and it almost feels like your mind is different. Like you feel like you're like, whoa, there's some interesting things that were going on there. And I think like that can be applied to anything, like great business, great hobbies, like ideally something that you go into and then it affects your mind in a very unique and desirable way. And so that's why like I think like the idea, like Hollywood is only ideas. It's basically 90% ideas. And I think that I just love the ideation area of trying to figure out like, how do I do this? How do I talk about this? How do I make this easier for somebody? How do I help my grandmother like have a TV set that works for her that she knows how to use? Like, how do I like, create something for this person that's very specific that will create a very unique experience? And I think I've always kind of operated that way, even since I was young. And I think the various endeavors that I go on is always trying to create something that feels organic, right? Like something that feels like it can evolve to the person that's experiencing it, rather than like something that's just like really brutal and hard and just like sorts you in somewhere. And I think that's what I was experiencing a lot with recommendations just in general, is I felt like I was being more categorized rather than catered to.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you say life's trying to figure itself out. I love that phrase. I mean, I think I'm just going to be pondering that one for the rest of the day. It's just really interesting. It is, though, isn't it? There's something about the current world that we live in and the current kind of collective human psyche that is, we haven't been here before. So we are really, it feels like we're going through uncharted territory. So this whole idea of really truly listening and watching and measuring and then adapting, this plays out in the wider world. We will come back to the whole movie thing shortly, I'm sure.
Right.
But there's something more holistic about this, isn't there? There's something bigger at play here. We're all trying to figure it out, and life in general is trying to figure itself out, because we don't have a playbook that says, actually, this time next week the world's going to look like this, or this time next year we're going to be doing this. It kind of,
Right.
it's evolving. Everything feels like it's evolving, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so I wanted to kind of contribute in some way to something that I think evolves like with us, not like not to us. Like, and I know that's like a little bit of a. I guess I'm going through this thought logic for this the first time in this moment, but I think kind of like what you were talking about. I I feel like the world is changing so much, and I think sometimes us trying to figure out how we're gonna like fit into it, like, or how we're going to adapt to it can be really overwhelming. I think especially now with like, AI is also like a big part of like why I wanted to create something that's like more specific around interests. In the way that my algorithm works is basically it compares other unique people profiles and essentially sorts to you the stuff that they love the most that you haven't seen yet, and vice versa. So it's kind of like this great filter of similarity. And i think that what I started to realize when I was going through most of the world is it what it promises that it's delivering to you often isn't what its main function is. Like, if you're dealing with like government websites, for instance, like, they're all kind of frustrating for a reason, is because they want you to be frustrated and give up. Like, that's their design purpose. And I think that the more I got into understanding the world, I realized that often what it's built for is not for convenience, not for ease of use. And I think that that was something that I started to see with the various other recommendation sites. And I thought, and I realized that these things aren't actually built to recommend to us as much as they promise that they are. They're built to sell us ads and keep us on the platform as long as possible. So the second that you get the thing that you want, that like, satisfying, you're already off. And they don't want that. And they want you to stay on it as long as possible. And so I think because everything basically falls to an ad based system, our whole world is ads. Like, you fly on Ryanair, like, it's the most ads because it's the cheapest. You're just constantly getting sold things while you're stuck there with no entertainment unless you bring it yourself. Like, it's interesting. And so I don't know. I wanted to specifically with this case try to create something. I don't know. I just keep thinking a lot about how do we get to the things that we love faster? Because I think life is so short. And like, Neil, I don't know for yourself, but like, when you are, what is your process for trying to find like a restaurant that you want to go to, or watch a movie that night? Like, what do you feel like is your process in particular to find something that you want to try?
That's a great question, isn't it? I suppose I am going in with a collaborative approach. I am looking to see other people like me, if there is such a thing,
Hmm.
and kind of what they're feeling and what they're sensing, and obviously their reviews. And we've all seen TripAdvisor and everything else like that,
Right.
Trustpilot, and I guess there is a sort of a comfort in kind of knowing that other people like us have been there, tested, trialed, and have come back with some kind of view. And then if there is a collaborative collective view, I guess you feel less of a test case. You feel much more, I guess, secure in the decision that you're going to make, even though you might get it completely wrong. It is that safety net, I guess, that collaborative
Right.
angle.
Yeah, like, even like you talking about research or TripAdvisor or any of that, like, a lot of things are built around an average consensus. So like 3,000 people say going to Big Ben is a 4 out of 5 stars, or like, or wherever. And I think like it's interesting because then it kind of makes a lot of those things inherently average. They're very, what's like the right word? They're validated average sources, and the more people that like it means that there's like a collective positive or a collective negative, but it is all revolving around this collective average. And I thought that that was like a really interesting thing, because it makes sense from a capitalist standpoint, is that Coca-Cola wants you to only buy Coca-Cola. They don't want you to know about like Fenneman soda, which is like this very specific, like, low scale manufacturer that makes like incredible soda. Like they don't want you to know that. So it's like anything that's massively produced, they want you to only have that. And I was like, why isn't there anything catering to our niche? It's always like the collective, like, average. And I just thought that that's like not really how humans work. Like, but it is, I don't know, it's so fascinating going through these things. And I think a lot with businesses or any journey that I've ever taken, it's always been like, what are the questions I want to ask and what are the answers that I want out of it? And I think like that's always been the main thing that's led me to want to work for some of the showrunners in Hollywood that I worked for. Is because I like, Lost was one of my favorite TV shows of all time. And I'm like, this guy is just like writing something that just feels like it's connecting with me on such a deep level. And I just want to learn from that. And I think and it will reveal more things I know about myself. And so I got to do that. And it felt like that was a very like specific niche case. But I think like in life, it's like we should seek out the things that feel like the most potent to us. And I think that often, going to, I was just in London, so I'm just thinking about the London Eye or Borough Market, and like there's things that are really good about those like places, like no doubt. But there's other things that if you were with a local that knew what you liked, they'd be like, no, 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 you're not going to go to, like this restaurant. You're going to go to this restaurant. You shouldn't go here. There's like this little music venue over here. They do jazz nights here. Like you could have just like an experience that's much harder to kind of get into from if you have just like a week vacation there. And I wanted to create something that's sort of, I don't know, just catered to our unique specificities and have support in making those decisions. Because even why I picked movies to start with is I just was like constantly scrolling through Netflix and I felt or Letterboxd, and I was just spending more time deliberating on what to watch rather than watching almost. Like I felt like it was a pretty intense experience for me to like pick something. And I saw a statistic that said the average person spends almost a half an hour a day figuring out what to watch. And I was like, that's just what to watch. And then I like calculated that over years that you spend a week of your waking life every year just deliberating often what to watch on Netflix. And I was like, what a waste of time. Wow, that's just like it's just gone, rather than just like looking at something that's sort of building into you and you building into it. And so I just wanted to I don't know, I wanted to play a role just in life to try to get us closer to experiencing the things that make us feel human, make us feel more of what we want to do, and also potentially at some point connect to like people or like have value from people. Because a lot of these devices that are going to come out are going to try to be your like girlfriend, your mom, your best friend, your like everything. Like they're going to try to like, it's gonna be like her. They're going to try to like be everything that you've ever wanted. And I think that there's something kind of sad about being locked in a vacuum with like this device that's just only programmed to keep you engaged with it as long as possible. Like it feels almost like a Black Mirror episode. It's kind of scary. Like I don't, yeah, I would hate for that to happen. So yeah.
That locked in a vacuum, I think, yeah, that's probably the worst kind of nightmare for most of us who, yeah, kind
Right.
of, and the phrase I've heard as well, kind of from others, has been this kind of, I'm in an echo chamber. All I'm doing is I'm hearing the same thing. It's like Groundhog Day. I'm hearing this same
Right.
thing going round and round and round because the algorithms have figured out I watched this thing once and now I'm kind of locked in. And we see it with news, don't we? The algorithms with news. You're being presented with, Kyle's news. I'm being presented
Mhm.
with Neil's news, and but what's the news? Actually, what is the news? You're getting a
Right.
flavor of news. I'm getting a flavor of news. But where's the real news? Where is the kind of almost the optimum news that is actually happening? Because it feels very skewed. And the algorithms in social media, as you're adhering to there, is kind of, it just, they're almost, they're serving for reasons that don't really benefit us. Whereas actually what you're
Right.
talking about is something, I guess, a lot more profound. Is it's kind of working in synergy, but almost in harmony with us as humans, and saying, look, we understand as a machine or a bot or whatever we're going to call it here, the OmList entity, the OmList kind of engine. We understand that you have shown a preference in that movie. Now, other people who are like you have shown a preference here, and they also like that movie. So we're going to tease, rather than just saying there's a recommendation, we're actually going to tease that kind of that decision or that moment out, and we're going to test it. It feels like this is a lot more intuitive. If a machine can ever have intuition, it feels that there's something more natural about this than just, hey, that's check the box there, that's check the box there, right, we'll just match you. Oh, and by the way, we can sell you some ads en route. I mean, is it more human? Because it feels like it.
I think it's almost like I want it to feel, it's basically the value of it is built from humans. And I think that is, often like when you're on Twitter or X or any of these things or TikTok, like they've already like said that they're creating AI content. And there's like bots and stuff that are creating content and people are engaging with that stuff. So it's like how much of the stuff that we're engaging with is actually made by people. And I think there's going to be a higher degree of or just a desire for finding stuff that we like. And not to say that AI doesn't create interesting content. Like there's a God, what is it? There's like a bot that everybody loves on Twitter that just makes different strawberries because everybody's obsessed with like OpenAI and their project Strawberry because they think it's going to be like AGI. And it just like prints all these strawberries. And for some reason, people just love this bot for some reason. And I think like, so there's obviously going to be like places for that, but I feel like there's not enough catering to the things that make us human and the things that make us connect as humans. But another one of the questions that when I was like starting OmList, I really wanted to know, because when I was in Hollywood, I also organized a lot of events like for people to like bond, whether we would go bowling, because bowling is like a worse first date idea because there's 2 people. But if there's 20 people, then that means you have to talk to different people at different points while you wait. And if you're all in teams of 5, then it means you have these like 5-minute little clusters with different people. And I was like, oh, that's like an interesting experiment. Or going to an escape room with 3 other people that had never met each other before was way better than like just going and getting dinner somewhere. Or, it's like constantly, what is it about these people that will like each other? And I think that's something I've always like tried to figure out. And I think that's why like the dating apps are honestly kind of failing. Like Gen Z and a lot of people, like they've had declining numbers of users. And I think it's because their model is broken. They're saying we want to help you find your person that you're going to be with. But the problem is that then they lose users. So their incentives is to keep you on the app as long as possible and having these sort of like transitory dynamics where you're not quite satisfied, but you're not quite dissatisfied. And I think a lot of people after the past like decade of this experiment of trying to find, partners or friends or whatever through these apps is that they don't want you to leave them. And so they can't actually give you what you want. And I think that that's something also really interesting is like, oh, a dating app isn't like its priority is not for you to find somebody you actually like. I'd be curious if they were actually built to have you find your soulmate. Like if maybe they actually know how and they just they're not incentivized to do that, because then immediately their user base would go to 0. And I think that that's kind of fascinating. Or there's just so many things. There's like how much does our social environment indicate what our tastes are? How much is us liking a certain band that we might not like at first just because we want to be a part of this group? Like, do I want to go with my friends at Taylor Swift even if I am not the hugest Taylor Swift fan, because it feels like they really love it and I want to experience something they love? And I think like that's the thing. But then Spotify is not a community social media app, and so like if music is communal, it's not, you know what I mean? Like there's all these like weird little questions about why we like the things that we do. Or I remember like last year I was in New York, and the interesting thing about, I was there for about a month, and I remember just like you would hear people's conversations on the street, and like I'd be walking to Central Park and I would just hear people talking about that show Beef that came out on Netflix. They'd be like, beef, like beef. And I was like, okay, like let me go check out beef. Like it's just like that thing where the collective consciousness is just like saying the same thing over and over again. Or if you hear a word for the first time, you all of a sudden see that word in every book that you read. Like I think it's kind of like that. Sometimes our interest is dictated just by repetition. But I think that we're now getting to the point where we've realized that things have been so overly optimized that if we're being told something over and over again, is that if we talk about something right here and we start talking about I don't know, like Axe body spray. I don't know if that's still like a thing, but then we'll just like your Facebook, anytime you open it, it'll just be like, oh, you really want to have some Axe body spray. And so it's just strange how these devices are like listening to us and the world's blending around us. And it just feels like intrusive. Like it feels like it's like, it just feels like it's, yeah, it just feels intrusive. And I just, yeah, my whole purpose is just to like figure out how do we find the things that we love and value more. But it ultimately comes down to, will the people value the things that they didn't have to exert a ton of energy to find, right? Like, can we only value something based off of the amount of effort that we put into it? So it's like, if I listen to every single Taylor Swift album, would I all of a sudden, because I put time into that, love it now or love it more now? As opposed to if I, all of the music that I liked before, whether it's like Radiohead or Coldplay or whatever, and then it's like, oh, you would also like Muse or Nine Inch Nails or whatever. And it just built off of that niche rather than me, just for whatever the circumstances of the world are, am experiencing something entirely new that's outside of my world that I find value in. And so that's like also a weird thing, is like, why do we like the things that we do? And that was another question I really wanted to just know the many answers to.
And I guess that why do we like the things that we do then opens up this, well, I guess it's limitless opportunity beyond OmList, which is, okay, I figured out now, Neil, what your movie recommendations are, and these are your kind of your prime ones that you would be interested in. And because of that combination, we now reckon that these are the kind of bands that you'd like, or this is the kind of art you'd like, or these are the kind of news services that you might find interesting, or the kind of sports.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost limitless, isn't it? That once you start to build this profile in a way that's unbiased, because we're not trying to sell advertising here, we're not kind of skewed to some, as you say, some commercial model, but there's
Mm-hmm.
something inherently so powerful about having that data around somebody. So Neil's movie profile, Neil's kind of top 10 movies, there's
Mm-hmm.
clearly some interrelationship between those, but also then the next tier of things that we would like to recommend to Neil, because we think Neil would like those based on those top 10. But then
Right.
about the music, about the sports, about the actors, about art, about culture, and it goes on and on. Where does this stop, or does it have to stop?
It might not. I like, because I think the interesting thing, like with what you just pointed out, whether it's like, is it the movie that you like? Is it the music in it? Is it like all these things? Like, there's so many elements. Like, if a painting's worth 1,000 words, then you know, a movie is worth probably 1 billion. And I think like what a lot of, I think the main difference between, there's two schools of thought. What you were just talking about and breaking it down is actually how a lot of like Netflix and a lot of like big data oriented companies actually went. They're all ran by machine learning people that also are becoming more AI driven people. And what they're thinking is that they, if they just pumped enough compute into it, they could generate everything that you want. They just don't have enough compute. And so that's why they're trying to build all these like nuclear reactors in America now to like basically create these artificial gods that are going to tell you, what new HBO show you should watch. And they believe that that's the only way to do it. And they might be able to, I don't want to be outside of the frame, but like they don't want to be, they're not asserting, or they're not, I don't think that they're catering towards the mystery of what humans are. They're trying to say that you, Neil, can be like broken down into Legos for as long as it is the smallest Lego possible. And like, we can like, you are built of all these things, and it will all have a mathematical equation and make sense if we just had enough compute. And I think that that is kind of wrong. And I think it doesn't really attribute to, I believe that there's a magic in people, and whatever, some people call it a spirit, some people call it like vibes. I don't know. Like whatever that is, I think there's something kind of inherent in us that I think is beyond binary. And so you can either go to say that humans can be entirely broken down into bits, or there's something else that we can't really account for. And I kind of would almost go for the account for. The actual magic of OmList is what exists between what its data is saying. Like, Neil, what are your three favorite movies that immediately come to mind, for instance?
Top Gun.
Top
Gun
Gun.
Maverick.
Oh wow.
I'm a simple soul, and I guess the first of the current series of the Dune movies. If I go for
Okay.
kind of contemporary movies, there's a lot of historic
Right.
old archive movies that I would still say I've got a passion for. But those are the three that come to mind right now.
Wow. So even so Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick, they would be able to definitely guess that you would like those two. Because they have the same actors, they have the same essential, it's sort of a similar plot, like in what its end piece is and what its beginning is. And so like they would be able to do that easily. But to go from Top Gun to Dune, especially the first Top Gun, I think, to Dune, I don't think anything would ever be recommended of that. There's virtually no overlap other than they fly some things. But that's like the tough thing. But there's something about you, Neil, that really likes Dune and Top Gun. And there's not like, is there military in Dune? They're more of like these like these soldiers that are like tied to these royal families. And Top Gun is just about a bunch of guys like on an air base, and eventually they'll have to like blow some people out of the sky. And so what the algorithms actually would do is they would try to break all those things down to their fundamental parts. They'd say, this is Tom Cruise. This is, directed by this person. This is also starring these other people. That means we'll compare it against your other movies and say, oh, you like, 4% of your top 20 movies have Tom Cruise in them. So then you must like Sound of Thunder. Or you must like, Mission Impossible. But you might be like, I don't really know. I don't really like Mission Impossible. I don't know why. I just don't. And it wouldn't be able to it wouldn't be able to understand that. And I think that what I'm basing my whole thing on is simply, what do we like more than something else? Like, how do we go through the thing, and the way that OmList works is you just swipe, you like something, you dislike something, and then you go to another page, which is after you swiped on a few movies, is what I'm calling battle mode, which is you're presented with two movies and you say, which do you like more, this one or this one? And the more that you do that, like you can hop off that and see what your recommendation is, but like the more you do it, and it can take some time. So if you have like 500 movies, you might have to click 4,000 times. But as you keep doing it, it's getting more and more specific as you're going through. And so eventually it'll create a ranked list for you saying, this is your number one movie against all, like competed against all the other movies. And then this is your least favorite movie. And our similarity score basically takes that and compares it against other lists. And then essentially says, like, these are the people you're most similar to, and these are the things that they like the most that you haven't seen. And the magic to that is that could be for anything. The only thing that is important in our life is the things that we value and give time to. Like, there's a person that's like, oh, Neil, we should hang out. And you're like, yeah, let's find a time. And you never find a time, but you're just like, you're trying to just be nice. But there are people that if they're like, Neil, like, I really need to see you tonight, you're just like, you're my priority. I'm going to be there for you tonight. Like, let's go get a pint or something. And I think like that shows a lot about where your priorities are. And that's the same thing with the things that we like. Like, what is there more than the things that we prioritize? And so simply by the things that say we would like this more than this, like some people's favorite movies from the app are like Singing in the Rain, Dune, and like E.T. And it's like, those are so different, like, and to try to say like, if that's somebody's 1, 2, and 3, there's nothing that Netflix or any of those algorithms would be able to do with that. It would almost be like it would just be like it's a non-fungible data. Just try to find more of the common similarities, and we'll just cater to that. Give them more sci-fi movies. Give them more whatever, because 20% of their movies that they've liked the most are sci-fi. And I think that is interesting, is like, what is it about your top 3 movies or your top 100 movies and the unique order of them and the space between that? Why is that on top of this one? That actually, I think, speaks to an incalculable amount of number about why is that? I'm not asserting that you just like Brad Pitt movies. We can kind of extrapolate that in data. That's kind of fun to show. But actually, like, what the meaning is of that is incomprehensible almost. It's like it's so unique. It could be because this is a movie you liked because it made you want to be an artist, or this is a movie that you liked because it made you feel closer to your father, or whatever. My main thesis is like, I think there are people in this world that are most similar to us, because technically, statistically, there is somebody in this world that has the most similar taste to you. You just don't have access to them, likely. And I wanted to create a device that, like, as it kept getting better, it would get closer to that person. And I was curious of that. Like, would we even like the person that likes the same, that is 99% the same movie taste as us? Maybe not. Maybe we actually admire people that have completely different tastes than our own. But what helps us develop as ourselves? And I think, like, that's kind of curious, is like, if we think of the world as you, Neil, have like these 7 different types of personalities around you, and almost by like some scientific order of things, like this personality trait is really attracted to you, and they like you, and they're like, he's our Neil, he does these things for us, like, we like this, we take up all of his time, and vice versa, with you did that with other people. And I think, like, if you built out that social, I don't know, graph, potentially another Neil would technically be the furthest away from you socially. You wouldn't actually probably enter their orbit very much, because they're at the opposite end of the Venn diagram. Whatever the overlap is of the other personalities, that person's over here. And so I was like, where would be the next Neil? Like, where would be the next me? Like, where would be those people, and what are they up to, and what have they figured out? And I thought, I don't know, that's also kind of like the weird, like, fantastical idea or question of this thing is like, when would it take for there to be a 99% similarity on OmList? And like, the more the app keeps getting users and goes, I keep seeing, the similarities rising. And is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people? Is it 1,000,000 people? Is it 1,000,000,000 people? We don't know. But I think, I don't know, that's why this thing is kind of like beyond certain things, or a lot of any of my other endeavors have always felt like this, like, it has this like ride, like this very like palpable magic inside of it that keeps me interested in it, because I'm constantly fascinated with what those answers will be.
And it stretches so far beyond movies. I mean, movies are such an evocative kind of almost wrapper to put around this philosophy, because it is deeper. It's so much deeper, and I was not expecting this, Carl. So thank you for kind of going so deep and sharing this. But there's some real profound kind of challenges, I guess, for all of us here. If having, say, gone through the OmList, and you've done the 4,000 swipes or clicks or whatever we're going to need to do to get to that almost optimum, you feel that almost doppelganger mirror person coming closer and closer and closer. And by the time you get to that 4,000 clicks or swipes, it's like, oh my God, they're that close. If I press one more, I'm going to actually see the profile. It's almost like movie dating, isn't it? It's kind of, there's something in this that kind of is connecting. Well, yeah, would you like them, I guess, is the question. Would you like that person? Would you actually see yourself reflected back in that person? I know you don't have that answer, but it's a rhetorical, quite profound question, isn't it? Is that, would movies be that kind of ultimate connection point? And then, in theory, actually, is what you're creating here a version of AGI? Because what you're doing is you're actually then seeing that really kind of profound human connection as a result of unbiased AI activity. That's so interesting. And you layer movies on it, you layer sports on it, you layer career on it, you layer lifetime choices, lifestyle, etc. You could put anything into this kind of, well, let's call it machine, but it feels so much more than that, but into this process. Anything is possible, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like that. Like, it's like each step to your closer copy, like, or your closer, I don't know, taste friend. Yeah, that is really fascinating. I've never even thought of it also about it being like its own version of an AGI, like, because it's I don't know, but I think it's the thing that always felt the most pure about it to me is it feels like it's charitable. It's charitable and selfish at the same time. If somebody just selfishly wants what they have or wants to get their next movie rec, that's totally fine. But by them processing that, they're creating something of value to the next person. And so it's like this compounding effect. And I like that. And that was something I think from my previous businesses, because I ran like a creative cooperative in Hollywood. That was like the first management company ran by creatives. And I learned a lot about that. And I wrote like a whole piece that's coming out in my Substack on Wednesday about it and what I learned from it. But the hardest thing in general is, how do you create systems that take people at their best and most ideal and take people at like their worst? And how do you have it be how do you have it be like a valuable experience no matter what is coming into it? And I think that is, I don't know, that's something I've definitely learned over time, is I can't always take people at their most ideal. I need to create situations that try to make the best even when they're not. And I think that, yeah, I think that that's like another aspect of this is just I don't know, just getting better. It's like filtering. I want us to filter the world. Like for some reason I'm really into juicers. Like I like just aesthetically. Like juice is great, but like it's just like seeing something solid go in and like the nectar of it comes out into this new form and it has like the color of it, but not the like form, not the structure of it, is like so fascinating. I think like there's something weirdly like tranquil about it, or just like the process of it is really interesting to me.
Wow. You're on I think, the cusp of something so much bigger, so much greater. And I know, obviously movie recommendations with a week of time saved per annum on Netflix alone. I mean, just wow. I think, if that's not a motivation for people to sign up to the list and kind of get started in the whole process, I don't know what is, because I mean that's valuable time. But it just feels that there is so much more that you will be uncovering kind of over time. I mean, this must feel to you like this is now a life mission.
Yeah, I think it's one of my many life missions, but I think like definitely creating this thing and figuring out like how to make it profitable, how to make it sustainable, how to do all these things but not try to like compromise it. Because I think the interesting thing also with making companies is you have kind of competitors, you're like, why haven't other people done this? Is that when you start to get feedback from people, you just start to realize the feedback you see reflected in their stuff. And you're like, oh, they might have been at this point and then they just like went to this thing. And I'm like, but hopefully I have like the unique element of it enough that I can hold on to it, that I can, based off of whatever, like have it still be valuable. And I think especially at this time where it's cheaper than ever to make things and it's easier to learn how to make things, is that I can finally create something that, 10 years ago would have cost tens of millions of dollars, like, 5 years ago, would cost like maybe $1 million. And for me to create this for around $50,000, like I think like that was like a really interesting experiment for me, because I also wanted to learn more about it and kind of just have it grow. Is that it can just stay. Everything, the movie data is refreshing from another open source that is basically created and monitored by people, and people just keep going into it, and the similarities keep going up. So as it is right now, it could just go forever, and it will reveal more and more, so long as the lights are kept on. And I think I don't know. It's just like I want to create as many of these little seeds in the world as possible to like create something that ultimately just is valuable to people. Because I think there is something more valuable than money. Money is really important, but if you can create something and keep the spirit of it alive and be creative enough to figure out how to sustain it, I think that that's the marker more of us should move towards. And I think we're about to see a huge boon in software, with how it's just getting easier every day to use it in code with like Cursor AI that's come out. I don't know if you code at all or if you've experimented with it, but there's a lot of really cool things coming up that are making people even faster. And so the things that are like our wildest dreams are now going to be able to be like projected into the internet, like closer and closer. And I think that that's kind of exciting, is like our dream machines are getting closer, and I think it's gonna yield some really exciting results.
It certainly is. And I think, I just really want to really advocate, the values that you're working to as well, because I think, these different measures of success as we get into, I guess, a lot of organizations and entrepreneurs and startups trying to leverage the whole concept of AI through whatever it is, tech platforms, courses, whatever. There's a lot of people just jumping on with the old paradigm of commercial success. I just love the mantra that you've got there, which is there's another definition of success, and it feels a lot more, kind of heart driven and sustainable. So, I applaud the work that you're doing. I want to, Kyle, get everybody signing up and get everybody experimenting. They need to save that Netflix scrolling time. How do people contact you? How do they get hold of the app?
They can go to omlist.io, which is the website, and you can download the app. It'll take you to the various places. It's currently only on the App Store, but any day, hopefully, it's going to be on Android and Google soon. So that'd be the best way to do it. And all my socials are Kyle F. Cords, like in this video. And I have a Substack that's called Founder Core. That's all about, lessons I've learned as a founder and cultivating more of a founder community, because it's I found this in Hollywood also. Like I always wanted to find the writers, but technically they were like the furthest away, like from me, or just starting, because it's like you can start on production or you can start in a corporate office, but how do you get to the writers? It's like this like thing where somebody says, yes, make a writer's room, but like it's the origin point. So how do you get to the start of something? And I think that was like the same with trying to find other founders that are also doing cool things. And so I have that Substack where I just kind of talk about what I've learned and what I'm up to. And but that's kind of me. But yeah, OmList, it's on the App Store. Check it out and find your favorite movies.
Kyle Cords, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Neil. I really enjoyed it.